Hey guys, welcome back to A&A Bookstore. For today's book, I'll be sharing with you guys about a movement that was led by the African Americans for equal rights. And yes, it is the civil rights movement. So let's start, shall we? Okay, so when people talk about the civil rights movement, they usually mean the period in the 1950s and 1960s, when African Americans fought for the same rights that white people had. Segregation was the worst in the South. Besides having to sit in separate rows in buses, black people went to separate schools, drank from separate water fountains, stayed in separate hotels, and lived in separate neighborhoods. And they weren't allowed to vote. So the United States Declaration of Independence says all men are equal. But when it was written in 1776, one out of every 5 people was enslaved. They had been kidnapped from Africa and sold to white Americans like properties. But many northern states wanted to make slavery illegal. Rather than agree to this, in 1860, 11 southern states began to break away. In 1861, they formed a new country, the Confederate States of America. It included Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, Texas, Arkansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. The border states of Kentucky and Missouri had divided loyalties. The North wanted the states to stay united. This led to civil war. When it ended in 1865, the South had lost, and slavery in the United States was over at last. Even so, African Americans continued to face discrimination. Discrimination means they were treated differently because of the color of their skin. The southern states created new laws that denied African Americans their rights. These were called the Black Codes, also known as Jim Crow laws. I'm sure you guys know or have heard of it. The Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow was the leader of music shows that made fun of the black people. White actors would darken their face with burnt color and dress in rags. Jim Crow was clumsy and was not very smart. He was meant to insult black people. Jim Crow's law was used to make black people second-class citizens. Second-class citizens are people who are not given equal rights. From 1915 to 1970, around 6 million black people migrated from the South. They still faced racism and unfairness, but life was harder for those who remained. Racism was not restricted to the South. Even the Supreme Court ignored the rights of black citizens. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the nation. What it says is the law remains the law. In 1896, a case went before the Supreme Court. The case was called Plessy v. Ferguson. So it was basically about Homer Plessy was a black activist. So he had a fair skin color, which allowed him to go to the white cars, but he supported the blacks. So the driver ended up didn't let him sit in the white row. So schools back then also, racist. They have 2 types of school, a white classroom and a black classroom. And you guys can see the clear differences between those 2 classrooms is that a white classroom is cleaner and they even have new textbooks. And the black classroom is pretty dirty and small, and they have to reuse the textbooks from the whites. So people also, so one of the girls called Linda Brown have to walk to school, and she remember when it snows, she just cried because it's too cold, and then all the tears were frozen. It sounds really hurting. So Linda's father went to the court. He said not allowing Linda to go to the local white elementary school went against the 14th Amendment's promise of equal rights. So he had a lawyer for that, and then they win. So on May 17, 1954, the court declared segregation in public schools to be unconstitutional. Unconstitutional meant it went against the law laid out in the U.S. Constitution. So, but many schools ignored the law. The city of Little Rock, Arkansas, did not integrate school until September 1957. So a group called Little Rock 9, so they go to school, but 8 of the 9 students were driving to school only to be stopped by the National Guard. The National Guard is a volunteer U.S. military group. The governor of Arkansas has sent them to stop a teenager from entering the school. Unfortunately, one student's family did not have a telephone and did not know about the carpool, so Elizabeth Eckford ended up facing the mob all alone. So news cameras snapped a picture of the brave girl holding up her head as people spat and yelled at her. So here is Elizabeth. And then President Dwight Eisenhower sent 1,200 soldiers and the National Guard back to Central High to keep the peace. So Little Rock 9 have to enter the school with an armed military escort. One of them said, "For the first time in my life, I feel like an American citizen." That sounds really sad because they were not treated right, so they feel like it's nothing if they get to live in America, in the U.S., if they aren't being treated equally. So if you ask people when the civil rights movement really began, some will say in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama. On December the 1st, a woman named Rosa Parks was riding home on a bus. Parks was a seamstress, and she was tired after a long day of work. And she was also tired for the racist rules of sitting in the bus. So when the driver told her to give up her seat for a white woman, she refused. And then he called the police, and then she said, "Go ahead." So the police was there and captured her. On Monday, December 5, over 90% of all black riders boycotted. They walked, carpooled, or rode bikes to work and school. So a young minister became the leader of the boycott. And yes, his name was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So a black group called Montgomery Improvement Association bought station wagons to use taxi cab to help boycotts travel to their town. Women raised money to pay for the cars, gas, and rents by selling food. The bus company was losing money daily. Without buses to bring black customers downtown, white-owned stores began to lost business. On December 20, 1956, the U.S. Supreme Court declared Montgomery's segregation laws unconstitutional. So yes, they had won, and the next day they get to sit wherever they want on the bus. So on February 1st, 1960, another kind of peaceful protest began. It too changed the way black people were treated in America. So that thing was just solve the bus problem. It does not solve the entire problem in the United States. So it started with 4 friends who were students in all-black college, Greensboro, North Carolina. They stood up for their rights by sitting down. Their local Woolworth store had a whites-only lunch counter. So even lunch counter, they have to segregate. Joseph McNeil was one of the students who started the protest. He said to face this kind of experience and not challenge it meant we were part of the problem. That Monday afternoon, the 4 friends each purchased something in the store. Then they took a seat at the lunch counter. "I'm sorry, we don't serve colored here," said the white waitress. McNeil and his friends had been inspired by Dr. King's sermons and nonviolent protests. They politely showed the waitress that the dinner's manager received for what they bought. Some white patrons cursed at them. Some encouraged them. The 4 men feared for their lives, but they held fast. They were not served that day, but they were not arrested either. They didn't go home until the store closed. Word of the protest traveled, and the young men became known as the Greensboro Four. So the next day, more students joined the Greensboro Four at Woolworth. They start sitting too much row that there aren't any seat for the white people. So then, they again win And at last, Joseph McCartney was be able to sit down to capture and eat a slice of apple pie. So there were also many other plot stuff, but I will skip some of them as it's gonna be really long. Next, Birmingham was a terrible nickname for Birmingham, Alabama. The Klan regularly bombed the homes and churches of black citizens here. So the Klan is basically a group that they dress like ghosts, I believe. They cover their face with white cloths all over their head, and they hate black, so they just bomb or kill them. And the reason why they put that cloth over their head is that they are afraid that the police might know who they are and capture them. Anyways, so Dr. King later called the most segregated city in the United States. But that did not stop black people from demanding their civil rights. On the morning of May 2nd, 1963, thousands of children ages 6 to 18 marched from 16th Street Baptist Church into downtown Birmingham. I was told not to participate, Jessie Shepherd recalled, but I was tired of the injustice. She was 16 at the time. Many parents were afraid for their children's safety. The city's commissioner for public safety was a white man named Bull Corner. Dr. King and other civil rights leaders believed not even Corner would harm kids, but they were wrong. On the first day of the march, more than 1,000 children were arrested. The youngest of them was only 9 years old. Less than 2 blocks from the church, Bull Corner's men were waiting. Out came the fire hoses. And then so they were using water and they just shoot over the black people. And you know, the water is like really strong, the hoses, so they just bam. And then, yeah. And it's very slippery too, so they fall. And then other children were beaten, and bruised. They were probably bitten by dogs and were beaten by the police. And many of them died. In the end, the White House urged the king of the city of Birmingham to negotiate with Dr. King. In the end, Birmingham agreed to desegregate public areas. Black people could now also work in downtown stores. Dr. King called it the most magnificent victory for justice we've seen in the Deep South. Anyway, so for those who don't know the Klan, that is these are them. So they have like a pointy mask. Yeah, basically a mask. That it covers the head this all the way, and it's only leave the eyes and probably the nose so that they could breathe. Anyways, let's continue. So, in 1963, there was a clear divide in the civil rights movement. One side moved carefully while the other wanted immediate change. And that immediate change side, the leader of that change was called Malcolm X. So it was a political group called National Islam, supported the idea of black nationalism. So he paired with them, but then Malcolm X stopped believing in black nationalism. He began to practicing Islamic religion, which wasn't exactly the goal that he set for, which was to free the black. Instead of that, he just wanted to practice Islam. So unfortunately, the Nation of Islam did not agree with his new ideas, and he was killed by members of that group in 1965. So several civil rights leaders joined for the big protest to prove nonviolence worked instead of that, like Malcolm X. So they decided to hold a walk. The march started in Washington Monument and ended at Lincoln Memorial. So Abraham Lincoln was the president who ended slavery. So they walk all the way to the fountain, and some of them dip their feet into the water. And then Dr. King spoke some of the most famous words ever heard. I have a dream. I have a dream, he said, that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He shared his belief that freedom would bring across the nation. all Americans would stand hand in hand and shout, "Free at last." So the March on Washington was a great success. But for white supremacists, it was cause for violence. In Birmingham, that meant the deaths of 4 innocent children. So on a peaceful Sunday morning at the all-black 16th Street Baptist Church, 4 girls were in the basement, were getting ready for the short practice. And then suddenly, they heard a bomb. And 4 of the 4 girls were killed instantly. They were Addie Mae Collins, Carol Robertson, Cynthia Wellesley, and were 14 years old. Dennis McNair was 11. So they all died. People took the streets to protest their deaths, support the civil rights movement growth. So President Kennedy had called for an end to discrimination. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 became law. It said the country would no longer allow discrimination on the basis of race, sex, religion, color, or national origin. So they were not actually free at last. There were also a little bit of a fight. So they were not completely free, but I will skip some of that parts. And I will move on to the parts that I'm sure you guys will know, which is the most recent event. When a black man named George Floyd was killed by police in 2020, the world rose up against it. Black Lives Matter marches were held worldwide to protest police brutality and the killing of African American men, women, and children. Many other minority groups still march to have their voices heard. So yes, the Black Lives Matter, it is now very popular, so I heavily support that. As Coretta Scott King, Dr. King's wife, said, "Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation." And so the people march on. That's the end of the book today. I actually really love the civil rights movement, and after reading this book, I know more about how terrible it was about racism, and it's honestly really hurtful for those who have been through that. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this book and learned something new, and don't forget to give my video a like if you like it. Have a nice weekend with your family, and bye!